Is RA 9262, otherwise known as the Violence Against Women and Their Children Law, applicable to lesbian relationships? Stick around as we break down this landmark case and what the ruling means for the LGBTQ+ community. Sandra and Maria were in a relationship for 16 years. But things fell apart during a Christmas trip to Hong Kong in 2017 when Sandra allegedly broke up with Maria. After they returned to the Philippines, Sandra would come to their home in Antipolo only to pick up her belongings, then leave again to be with her new partner. Maria eventually asked Sandra to stop using her credit cards, reminding her that she still owed Maria 3 million pesos. Soon after, Sandra began demanding that Maria leave the house and even tried to force her to sign a deed of absolute sale to transfer the property. Maria refused. On January 12, 2018, Sandra allegedly became furious and threatened to destroy everything and burn the house down. The threats caused Maria to suffer chest pains and difficulty breathing, and she had to be taken to the hospital. The next day, Sandra visited Maria at the hospital and tried to make amends. But when they returned home, Maria claimed that Sandra forced her to take Rivotril, a drug that made her weak and groggy. When Maria regained consciousness on January 14th, she found herself naked, with Sandra allegedly on top of her taking photos and videos. Maria, terrified that Sandra might harm or even kill her, begged her to delete the files. When Maria followed her to the car, Sandra allegedly slammed the car door repeatedly on Maria's hand and pushed her to the ground. Maria suffered a fractured wrist that required surgery and physical therapy. Later, when the case was filed against Sandra, she claimed that Maria only filed the case against her to gain an upper hand in another case Sandra had already filed in the Antipolo court. That case was about reclaiming property, canceling the land title, and asking for damages. Sandra said she was the one who bought and built the house in Antipolo and accused Maria of staying there after their breakup just to manipulate and provoke her. Sandra also told a different version of what happened after Maria was discharged from the hospital. According to her, Maria seduced her into having sex and even asked her to take nude photos of them together. Later, when Sandra asked Maria to delete the pictures, Maria allegedly became hysterical, followed Sandra to her car, and grabbed her hands to stop her from getting in. Sandra said Maria fell to the ground as she tried to get away. Eventually, on June 8, 2018, Sandra was formally charged in court for violating the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act, RA 9262. Sandra asked the court to dismiss the case, arguing that the law doesn't apply to lesbian relationships. So, to put it simply, the main issue is whether the trial court made a mistake in rejecting Sandra's request to dismiss the case, based on her claim that RA 9262 doesn't apply to lesbian relationships. On July 24, 2019, the trial court rejected Sandra's attempt to dismiss the case. The court said that under Republic Act 9262, any person, whether male or female, can be held accountable for abuse. Referring to the landmark case of Garcia versus Drylon, the judge explained that the law uses gender-neutral terms, which means it also applies to same-sex or lesbian relationships. Sandra asked the court to reconsider, but on November 28, 2019, her request was denied again. That's why she brought the issue to the Supreme Court, arguing that the law shouldn't apply to lesbian relationships and asking the High Court to overturn both lower court decisions. The Supreme Court denied Sandra's petition for two main reasons. First, because she used the wrong legal remedy, and second, because her arguments lacked merit. According to the rules of court, an appeal can only be made from a final judgment or order that completely resolves a case. However, Sandra was challenging the trial court's denial of her motion to quash, which is considered an interlocutory order, meaning it does not end the case and therefore cannot be appealed. The court explained that the proper remedy would have been for Sandra to go through trial and, if the outcome was unfavorable, to raise the issue of the denied motion during an appeal of the final judgment. Furthermore, the petition was incorrectly filed under Rule 45, which is meant for appeals from final decisions. Even if the court were to treat the petition as one under Rule 65, which allows for a special civil action, it would still be dismissed because Sandra bypassed the lower courts and violated the rule on the hierarchy of courts. The Supreme Court again affirmed that Republic Act number 9262, or the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act, applies to lesbian relationships. While Sandra claimed that the charges filed against her should be dismissed because Republic Act 9262 supposedly does not cover same-sex relationships, the court held otherwise. The law, particularly Section 3A, clearly uses gender-neutral terms, stating that violence may be committed by any person who has or had a sexual or dating relationship with a woman. This language, the court emphasized, includes lesbian relationships. The court referenced its earlier ruling in Garcia v. Drillon, where it already ruled that the law does not discriminate against men, nor does it only apply to male perpetrators. In fact, the use of the term person was intentional to ensure that individuals of any gender, including women, can be held liable under the law if they inflict harm on a woman with whom they had a romantic or sexual relationship. Sandra's argument that Garcia was merely an opinion or obiter dictum was rejected. The court clarified that in Garcia, one of the main issues was whether R. A 9262 violated the Equal Protection Clause by allegedly targeting men. Since the court ruled that it applies equally regardless of the offender's gender, this interpretation forms part of the binding ruling, not just a side comment. Thus, based on this precedent, Sandra's motion to quash the case against her had no legal basis, and the petition was denied.